I transmigrated into the role of the main mistress of the Who mansion, and my stepson is the devoted second male lead from the story. When he grows up, he'll resort to coercion and splurge fortunes to claim the female lead. He'll sow discord between her and the male lead, framing him for crimes. In the end, the hero and heroine will team up to defeat him. He'll retreat to a Buddhist monastery, remaining unmarried for life, and the Who mansion, dragged down by his actions, will be seized, stripped of its noble title, and its inhabitants exiled. Now that I'm here, looking at the sweet-faced child putting on an act of obedience, I've made up my mind. He wants to be gloomy. No way, I'll make him sunny. He wants to waste money. Absolutely not. I'll raise him to be thrifty and family-oriented. I will protect this vast wealth of the Who mansion. Later, people gossiped that I spent money recklessly and acted arrogantly. My stepson retorted sharply, "Nonsense. My mother is the most frugal and virtuous. She sponsors dozens of scholars, all with money she saved herself. Can you say the same?" Others claimed I was ruthless, acting more like a man than a lady. My stepson's expression turned cold. "My mother is gentle and kind. She could have taken your money by force. But she gave you a fair chance to compete. You're just incompetent, pathetic." Even his father couldn't hold back. "Son, open your eyes. Your mother is not one to be bullied." My stepson snapped angrily. "Father, don't force me to turn against you. You can criticize me, but you never speak ill of my mother." Let me repeat, I transmigrated to be the Who mansion's mistress. The good news: the mansion is wealthy, I could splurge freely. The bad news: my stepson, the story's devoted second male lead, will grow up to be even more wasteful than me. 80% of the Who mansion's fortune will be spent on bailing the female lead out of trouble and competing with the male lead. I stared at 9-year-old Xielanting. His skin was dark, his features innocent, and he kept his eyes downcast, hiding his true feelings. But I knew he was faking obedience. Beneath that small frame burned a fierce anger, an anger that would fester as he grew, eventually leading him to destroy everything. The steward cleared his throat. "Madam, where shall we arrange for the young master to stay?" In the original story, the previous mistress had banished Xielanting to a remote courtyard, ignoring him completely. He'd lived there alone for years, fending for himself, trying to be invisible, quiet and obedient like a ghost. It wasn't until he revealed his extraordinary talent for studying, earning praise from his teachers and admiration from his peers, that his father finally took notice, making him the true young master of the Xie family. Later, when he grew up, he'd dive into power struggles, forcing his father to yield authority, killing the previous mistress, seizing control of the Who mansion, and clashing with the male lead. He'd use coercion to claim the female lead, ultimately ruining the Who mansion before walking away to become a monk, leaving all his mess behind. The side story even mentioned that he'd later mastered Buddhist teachings, translating countless sutras that were widely celebrated. People would lament his tragic fate. He was pitiful. I could imagine how desolate a 9-year-old must feel, abandoned in a backyard to survive on his own. But the innocent members of the Who mansion, dragged down by his actions, were even more pitiful. After all, not everyone had wronged him. "Now that I'm here, things will change," I spoke gently. "Let him stay in my courtyard first, in the eastern wing. Lanting, does that work for you?" Xielanting looked up in shock, his dark eyes filled with confusion. When he realized I was staring at him, he finally confirmed I'd called his name. He bowed his head, awkwardly murmuring, I'm not Lanting. My name is Godand Xiegauden." In the story, he'd always been called Xielanting. I'd never known he had such an unrefined past name. I smiled, but the smile quickly faded. "I'm Chunhua, Song Chunhua, your stepmother." Xielanting's lips twitched slightly, but he quickly lowered his head, pretending nothing had happened. "Me, Gauden and Chunhua." It sounded like a peasant mother and her kid, way too down to earth. "Change them. Both of them, immediately. I ordered the steward to go to the government office to handle the name changes. From now on, his name is Xielanting Lan as in the gentleman's orchid, Ting as in the Jingting mountain. May he grow up to be as virtuous as the orchid and as resilient as a mountain. And while you're at it, change my name too, to Song Jiari. Jiao as in joyous festival, Yi as in pleasant. I hope for smooth days and peace every year. Xielanting's eyes flickered, his expressionless face seemed to soften a little. I asked a servant boy to help Xielanting bathe, but soon, commotion erupted from the eastern wing. When I walked in, the servant was panicking, trying to persuade Xielanting to undress. The boy stood rigid, clinging to his clothes, his expression warning everyone to stay away. I waved the servant out, speaking softly. I said, "Can you tell me why, if you bathe alone, no one can scrub your back, you won't get clean? Or, would you like me to help you scrub it? I can do that." Xielanting's gloomy eyes turned colder. He bowed his head and mumbled, "I can clean myself, I can reach my back too." I sighed, "All right. Did someone say bad things about me? Tell you I don't like you? I know being a stepmother is hard. Even if I laid my heart bare, you still wouldn't like or trust me. I should have known." My voice cracked. A husband who never comes home, a stepson who won't accept me. My life is so miserable. I covered my face and sobbed, though I had no tears, so I just shook my shoulders for effect. Xielanting deadpanned, "That's obvious acting." Me, "Sorry my terrible acting offended your eyes," he mumbled again. Quieter this time, "I don't hate you, I'm afraid you'll hate me." Slowly, he rolled up his sleeves. I gasped, his arms were covered in scars. I lifted his shirt, and my breath caught. His back was crisscrossed with whip marks. Some had faded to white, others were fresh and red. My heart ached, as if I'd been whipped too. "Who did this?" Xielanting said nothing. His face darkened, and a flash of hatred flickered in his eyes before he bowed his head, hiding it. He pulled his clothes back over his body, the tiny hint of vulnerability gone. He tensed up again, like a hedgehog. He probably thought that even if his stepmother knew, she couldn't help him. I'd skipped parts of the book, so I didn't know the full story of his suffering, but I could guess. A child whose father was away at war, whose mother had died young, forced to rely on relatives, his life must have been miserable. But I'd never imagined he'd been abused. I took his hand and ordered the steward, "Fetch a doctor. Prepare horses. Gather the men. We're going back to the hometown." Xielanting stared at me, stunned, as if he couldn't believe his ears. It wasn't until we mounted the horses and galloped toward his hometown that he finally accepted it. He fidgeted, then asked, What are we going to the hometown for? To get revenge?" I finally understood why Xielanting would grow up so cruel. The grievances of his childhood had been too heavy. He'd had no power to fight back, no one to stand up for him. That hatred had grown with him, turning him into a man who was secretive, ruthless, hypocritical, and starved for love. No wonder a single kind word from the female lead would melt his heart. No wonder once he had power, he'd take extreme revenge, earning the hatred of everyone. What I needed to do now was pull that seed of hatred out of his heart before it festered and destroyed him. Neither of us knew how to ride a horse, so we had to be held by guards. Xielanting was tough. His legs were rubbed raw, but he said nothing. I was held by a female guard, and I was miserable too. It was my first time on a horse. I was sure my legs were bleeding, the pain burning like fire, but we had to hurry. It had taken Xielanting 3 days to travel from his hometown to the capital. If we went back slowly, his wounds would heal and we'd lose our excuse to confront his abusers. Riding a horse was painful, but it would take only half a day. By evening, we reached the village where he'd grown up. It was picturesque, with cooking smoke curling from chimneys. People who'd finished dinner wandered around, chatting casually. Our group rode into the village in a grand procession. Someone recognized Xielanting and ran to the Xie family's house to report. I slowed down intentionally. So by the time we reached his uncle and aunt's house, a crowd had gathered, staring at us curiously. Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie hurried out, grinning, but their eyes were guilty, and they shot warning glances at Xie Lanting. He bowed his head, too afraid to meet their eyes. I didn't force him. Instead, I shouted, "Seize these heartless wretches and beat them." The guards moved at once. In moments, Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie were lying on the ground, beaten senseless. Uncle Xie's eyes bulged with fury. "You shrew, how dare you hit me? When my elder brother comes back, I'll make him divorce you. And you little brat," he spat. "I slaved to raise you, and this is how you repay me," Aunt Xie chimed in. "We're Godan's elders. What's wrong with disciplining a child? He's lazy, greedy, and wicked. Disciplining him is only right." They talked a lot, which meant they still had strength left. I wanted to dismount in a graceful move to give them a proper scolding, but the horse was too tall, and I was afraid to jump. In the end, I had to turn around, stick out my bottom, and carefully climb down. So embarrassing. The female guard helped me gently, and I caught the hint of a smile on her lips. Xie Lanting, though, seemed to know how to do it instinctively. He jumped off the horse in a smooth, neat move, then stood beside me, his gaze holding a hint of trust and filial affection. I pulled up his sleeve and said coldly, "His father sends you silver every year, hoping you'd treat him well. Is this how you raise a child?" The whip marks on his body made the crowd gasp. But beating children was common in the village. Right away, someone stepped forward as a peacemaker to defend Uncle Xie. Xie Lanting didn't hesitate. He pulled off his upper garment, bearing his wounds for everyone to see. Instantly, the crowd fell silent. Instead, they began to accuse Uncle Xie. "How could you be so cruel? Doing something worse than a beast." A warm feeling settled in my chest. Had he been protecting me just now? He was actually a good kid, grateful and able to tell right from wrong. He just had bad luck, walking this path all alone, never having anyone stand up for him. That's why, when he got even a little kindness, he'd cling to it desperately, trying over and over to prove he was loved, only to hurt others and himself, sacrificing himself to the abyss while dragging others down with him. I didn't think what he'd done, in the original story, was right, nor did I want to make excuses for him. But I knew I could do something, help him truly find himself, and seize his own real destiny. I helped Xie Lanting cover his body again, then grabbed the horsewhip and lashed out at Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie without mercy. "I'm your elder sister-in-law, your elder. Since you don't know how to be decent humans, I'll teach you. You too are stupid and evil, greedy, black-hearted. Only heartless wretches would abuse a child like this. If his father finds out his son was wronged and still lets it go, that's his business. But today, I won't let this pass. You'll take your punishment. If I get divorced someday, I'll come back with a knife and chop you both up. A divorced woman has nothing to lose anyway. I might as well drag you to hell with me before I die." Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie screamed in agony. They were quick to beg for mercy, their mouths spouting apologies non-stop. But I could tell it was fake. Their acting was terrible, totally perfunctory, just to avoid more beating. I could see right through it. Suddenly, a child rushed out, yelling, "Stop bullying my parents." He threw himself onto Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie. I paused my whip. Aunt Xie immediately pulled the child into her arms, her eyes shooting daggers at me, then at Xie Lanting, her killing intent undisguised. I was sure that if she got another chance, she'd kill Xie Lanting without hesitation. But the way she held the child close showed she clearly loved her own kid deeply. The boy broke free from Aunt Xie's arms and lunged at Xie Lanting, kicking and hitting him. "I'll beat you to death. Beat you to death. You stole our food and brought people to bully my parents. Die." Xie Lanting didn't dare fight back. He even squatted down instinctively, covering his head with his arms. My eyes darkened. I signaled to the steward, who pulled the child away. Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie went crazy, screaming and cursing, hysterically yelling that I'd die a terrible death. At the same time, they begged pitifully for me not to hurt their son. The boy's name was Taidan, Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie's only son. I knelt down to look at Xie Lanting. Did he always hit you like this before? Yes, he said. Aunt Xie shouted in a panic. So what if kids fight? What kid doesn't fight? When have you ever seen an adult meddle? If you can't take it, don't play. She actually had a point. I turned to Xie Lanting. Do you want to fight him back? Xie Lanting's eyes lit up for a moment. But then he glanced at Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie and shook his head. I encouraged him. Go fight him. It's okay if you lose. Xie Lanting hesitated. I just looked at him gently, my gaze steady. Uncle Xie let out a cold snort. Aunt Xie's eyes were filled with pride. Taidan sneered. Come on then, fight me if you dare. I'll beat you to death. Don't think this bad woman's backing you up. I'm still not afraid of you. Xie Lanting snapped. He charged forward and threw a hard punch at Taidan. But his courage only lasted 3 seconds. Soon, Taidan had him pinned down and was hitting him. I didn't interfere. I just stood by and watched, ready to stop Taidan if he played dirty tricks. Taidan won, and he looked so proud of himself. Uncle Xie's family looked proud too, like their son was some kind of hero. I pulled Xie Lanting up. He hung his head, his face dirty, his eyes red, his gloomy eyes were filled with anger and shame. He tried to pull his hand out of mine, but I held on firmly. He tugged his hand twice, but when he couldn't break free, he went still, letting me hold it. I told the steward we'd stay here for the night, then ordered Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie to tidy up a room. Why should we? Aunt Xie snapped, unwilling. I didn't answer. Instead, I lifted the whip and struck Uncle Xie. Aunt Xie panicked. If you've got the guts, hit me. What kind of coward hits my husband? This time, I lashed Uncle Xie several more times. Uncle Xie lost his temper. He dodged while yelling, "Go do it. Stop wasting time with all this nonsense." Taidan tried to rush over again. This time, I didn't stop. Instead, I kept whipping. Aunt Xie immediately grabbed Taidan. "I'll go tidy it up. I'll do it right now." Xie Lanting and I settled in. The doctor who'd come with us examined Xie Lanting's wounds. Sighing repeatedly, before leaving, he reminded me, "Some of these old scars look like they're 4 or 5 years old." I thought about the timeline. Xie Lanting's father had been drafted into the army roughly 4 years ago, which meant Xie Lanting had started being beaten the moment he moved in with Uncle Xie's family. How cruel people could be. I wiped the dirt off Xie Lanting's face, and he let me handle him quietly. When we were alone, he whispered, "I embarrassed you today." I cupped his cheeks, squishing them into a little round shape like a steamed bun. I smiled and said, "Embarrassed? You made me proud today. You dared to set aside your pride and take off your shirt in front of everyone. You did that for me, because you see me as your mother. And you didn't want people to misunderstand me for bullying others. You didn't want to fight Taidan. But when he called me a bad woman, you rushed over and punched him right away. You stood up for me. I'm overjoyed. You'd never fought anyone before, but you summoned the courage to do it for me. Where can I find such a loyal, loving son who defends his mother? I didn't even have to give birth to you, and I got such a treasure. I'm so lucky." "Oh really?" Xie Lanting's eyes lit up, full of uncertainty but longing for my confirmation. I didn't hold back my praise. "Of course it's true. You're tough and persistent. We covered a 3-day journey in half a day, and you didn't complain once about the hardship. When we got here, your uncle and aunt glared at you secretly, and Taidan bullied you. But you were still so brave, not a bit timid. Having a good son like you is a blessing I earned in my past life. In my past life, I was poor. In this life, I have money to spend that counts as a blessing, right?" Xie Lanting gave a shy smile, then said confidently, "But I lost the fight. But you took the first step, you know, for someone who's always been bullied. The hardest thing is fighting back for the first time. I originally planned to encourage you for days to get you to do it, but you did it in one go today. You're a little genius. You lost only because you're a polite, well-mannered kid who doesn't like fighting and has no skills for it. But Tiedan's different, he's used to hitting you and knows how to fight. If we work on your skills, one day you'll beat him. For example, today when he grabbed your hand. You two were so close that it was hard to use your hands or feet, but you could have kneed him in the stomach. I taught him a few self-defense moves I'd seen in short videos in my past life. I'd learned them to protect myself when I lived alone back then. Never in a million years did I think I'd never run into a villain, but I did run into a terrible boss, and ended up dying from overwork. I was so unlucky. Xie Lanting learned seriously. Practicing late into the night before finally going to bed, still looking eager for more, I went out and told the steward to pick a guard with good martial arts skills from our group to teach Xie Lanting how to fight starting tomorrow. The steward sighed. You're so kind to the young master. A mother being good to her child is only natural, I said. The steward hesitated, as if he wanted to say something but held back, then hesitated again. In the end, he just smiled warmly and turned to go about his business. The original mistress had been very annoyed when she heard Xie Lanting was coming back to the mansion, so the steward must think I'm acting completely out of character now. That night, I made Uncle Xie's family sleep in the firewood shed. The reason was simple. I just found out that Xie Lanting had slept there for 4 or 5 years. In the middle of the night, I heard the sound of Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie hitting a child. Get out of my way, you little girl. How dare you squeeze over here? Move to the side. Your brother knows how to protect his parents, but you're an ungrateful wretch who only hides in the house to sleep. Scram! The faint sound of a little girl crying rang out, then faded into muffled sobs. Xie Lanting was woken up too. He said that was Aria, Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie's youngest daughter. A girl. He looked at me, his mouth half open, but in the end, he said nothing. I didn't ask either. I waited for him to speak up on his own. I couldn't read his mind or guess what he was thinking. If he wanted something from me, he had to learn to talk to me, to communicate. The next day, Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie got up to cook. A little girl was helping them. She had dark skin but bright eyes, though her gaze was as dull as stagnant water, lacking the innocence of a child, filled only with sadness and apathy. Aunt Xie ordered her to bring over the food. The steward whispered to me, "Madam." I saw them spit in the rice. Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie looked terrified, hurrying to deny it. I smiled, then took out a prepared packet of laxatives and sprinkled them into the rice. After stirring it well, I told someone to bring the rice to Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie and make them eat it. Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie froze, then struggled frantically. "What is this? I won't eat it. Just a little laxative to cure your black hearts," I said. I had people force the rice into their mouths. As soon as they finished eating, they tried to gag themselves to vomit it up, but soon after, they clutched their stomachs and rushed outside in a panic. By the end of the day, they were completely drained. Later, they lay in the firewood shed, groaning in pain and unable to move. Xie Lanting and I went to the neighboring house. This time, I'd brought many people with me, and most of them stayed with the villagers nearby. We even gave the villagers some silver, which made them happy, and they took great care of us with meals and accommodation. I'd never planned to eat at Uncle Xie's house in the first place. I just wanted to see what other disgusting things they'd do, so I could hit back with something equally disgusting. After dinner, I told Xie Lanting to fight Taidan again. Taidan had been holding in his anger ever since he saw his parents' state. To give him credit, he had a bit of spirit in him. He was a good kid at heart, but he'd been raised by terrible parents, and all his energy had been wasted on bullying the weak. This time, Xie Lanting still lost the fight. But Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie were beaming with pride, as if their wounds had healed and their stomachaches were gone. They hummed tunes, praising their son for being so capable one moment, and scolding Aria for being slow the next. When the doctor was applying medicine to Xie Lanting's wounds, he didn't look discouraged at all. I teased him on purpose. "Oh, why aren't you sad at all today?" Xie Lanting's eyes sparkled with certainty as he said, I hit him 7 times today. He only beat me because he's stronger. If I eat more, I'll definitely beat him next time. That was true. Xielanting's small, malnourished body had lasted so long only because he was quick-witted that day. He ate a lot at every meal. After eating and resting for a while, he'd go practice martial arts with the guard the steward had found for him. The guard understood what I wanted. He skipped the basic drills and taught Xielanting practical combat skills right away. In the evening, Xielanting went out for a walk, but came back with a gloomy look on his face. He'd heard someone bad-mouthing me outside. He chased after them to argue, but they'd run away, sticking out their tongues and mocking him as they went. Xielanting looked dejected. It's okay if they insult me, I just hate it when they insult you. Oh, he really was such a good kid. All the favor I'd shown him was worth it. I gave Xielanting a stack of paper with patterns drawn on them, telling him to give these papers to the villagers. Give 3 to those who were kind to you, 2 to those who were friendly, and 1 to those who never bullied you. For the rest, give them if you want. Don't if you don't. But the most important thing, never give any to those who bullied you. He could take the paper to see the doctor, and the Hu mansion would cover all the costs. Xielanting looked up, biting his lower lip. That'll cost a lot of money. The villagers were poor. They only saved their limited money for emergencies. They'd never dare go to a doctor unless they had no other choice. I smiled and patted his head. It's okay. Go on, you're worth every penny. Xielanting stared at me in a daze, his eyes turning red. After a long moment, he lowered his head, his cheeks flushed, and whispered shyly, "Mother." After he said it, he looked up again, waiting anxiously for my reaction. My heart melted completely. I pulled him into my arms and patted his back gently. My good boy. By the next day, the house where we stayed was crowded with people. Dr. Wang, who'd come with us, was a kind old man who was happy to treat the villagers. Whenever someone came with a paper, he'd feel their pulse and prescribe medicine without taking a single coin. Some people tried to cheat to get free treatment, but he stuck to the rules and told them to pay if they didn't have a paper. After a few such incidents, those who wanted to take advantage left in a huff. Only the villagers who had helped Xielanting or never bullied him stayed. In my past life, when I watched TV dramas, my favorite part was when good people got good rewards. What I hated most was when good people were driven into despair before their rewards finally came. There was always a touch of sorrow in that happiness, a painful ache that tugged at your heart. So now that I had the power to do so, I wanted good people to get their rewards as soon as possible, not after waiting for ages. In no time, many people were praising me for being kind and beautiful. The few who had badmouthed me behind my back looked regretful, but it wasn't true remorse. They just regretted missing out on the free treatment. While Dr. Wang was treating people on one side, Xielanting fought Taiden again on the other. This time, though, Taiden didn't get the upper hand. He bruised Xielanting's forehead, but Xielanting split his lip. Aunt Xie cursed non-stop, her eyes looking like she wanted to kill Xielanting. But when she saw me staring at her, she forced a smirk and then kicked Area hard. The kick the cat effect. People only take out their anger on those weaker than them or below them in status. In the Xie family before, Xielanting had been the lowest. Now it was Area. That night, I reviewed the day's events with Xielanting. Xielanting said, "Today, several people who bullied me before came to curry favor with me. They wanted me to give them a paper too. Did you give it to them?" I asked. "No," he answered. "What were you thinking?" I was curious about his true feelings. Xielanting lowered his eyes. "I just didn't want to. If I'd given it to them, I would have felt wronged. I don't know why." "Mother, do you think I'm a bad person?" If he'd given them the papers, he would have betrayed the child he used to be, the one who suffered so much. I looked at him seriously and said, "If you'd given them the papers, I would have been angry. Good people have to take action and show kindness to get rewards. But if bad people can get things just by talking sweetly, that's not fair. If that happened, No good people would want to be around you, because they'd be wronged by you. Only bad people who talk sweetly would stay. They'd flatter you when you're doing well, and kick you when you're down. You did the right thing today by sticking to your heart. I'm proud of you." A proud smile lifted the corners of Sielanting's mouth. He carefully pressed his cheek against my hand. "Mother, everyone was praising you today. I'm so happy." I patted his head. It felt like another splinter in his heart had been pulled out, little by little, and it seemed I really was turning his fate around, one small step at a time. On the third day, someone came to see the doctor with a fake paper. Dr. Wang frowned deeply as he examined it, then calmly pointed out the flaws, saying the paper and handwriting were completely different from the real ones. The man was both embarrassed and flustered. He even offered to pay for the treatment, but Dr. Wang refused. "You won't even take my money, aren't you a doctor?" the man snapped. Dr. Wang shook his head. "I was brought here by my master. I only follow my master's orders." The man huffed in anger and turned to leave, but I called out to stop him. Sielanting had told me about this man before. He'd found Sielanting annoying, kicked him once, then laughed loudly, like it was the funniest thing in the world. Sielanting had never done anything to offend him, but this man had just wanted to hit him. He'd even asked me if he had a face that deserved to be beaten, like he looked easy to bully. His words had broken my heart. Kids who are bullied a lot often have a weak aura, and bad people can easily tell which kids they can bully without consequences, so they keep doing it. It's not that the kid did anything wrong. The ones in the wrong are the bad people, not him. I said to the man, "You kicked my son once before, let him kick you back, and then I'll let the doctor treat you. Take it or leave it." The man looked stunned. He frowned and thought for a long time, as if he'd finally remembered the incident. "I was just joking. You're still holding such a small thing against me." I stared at him coldly, saying nothing. "Joking? I'd love to joke about breaking your skull." The man saw how serious I was, and probably weighed the pros and cons. Going to the county town to see a doctor and buy medicine would cost him more, and that doctor's skills were no match for the Hu Mansion's physician. In the end, he forced an awkward smile. "Fine, kick me then." I was just, back then, I turned around, not bothering to listen to his excuses. There's no point in listening to a bad person's justifications. I told Sielanting to kick him 3 times, since Sielanting was still small and weak. I'll admit I hold a grudge. When I was a kid, I went to a small shop to buy something. I gave the owner 10 yuan, but he insisted I'd only given 5. He yelled at me and chased me away. When I got home, my dad accused me of spending the money on snacks and lying about it. Then he beat me. That feeling of being wronged stayed with me my whole life. As I grew up, I kept thinking, why didn't I stand up to that shopkeeper back then? What was the worst that could have happened? I was already going to get beaten anyway. When I became an adult, I swore I'd never let that happen to me again. I'd never been in a relationship, and I didn't know how to raise a kid, but I remembered the grievances I'd felt as a child. I didn't want Sielanting to suffer the same way. Sielanting kicked the man 3 times. The man didn't care at all. He just patted his clothes and went to see the doctor. Only Sielanting stood there, staring blankly. "He doesn't even care," he said quietly. It seemed that way. People who hurt others don't care about what they've done. When it's brought up, they treat it like a joke and even think the victim is overreacting. Only the victim is left behind, tormented by the pain. It reminded me of when I grew up. I read some psychology books to try to make peace with myself. I even worked up the courage to tell my dad he'd wronged me back then, but he'd long forgotten the incident. Instead, he got angry that I'd brought it up, calling me ungrateful, saying I only remembered his mistakes and none of his kindness. Those were 2 completely different things, but he mixed them up, forcing me to pretend those grievances had never existed. After that, I stopped telling him anything real. I only told him the good stuff and hid the bad. He'd never know what I truly thought, and I no longer cared what he thought of me. I smiled softly. That's why most people's opinions don't matter. What matters is doing what you want to do, so you don't regret it later. That day, Xielanting was in a great mood, and because of that, he finally beat Taidan. Taidan ran to his mother, crying. Aunt Xie was so anxious that she got a blister on her lip. These days had been miserable for her. I'd taken over their house, made them wait on all of us, and watched as we used their things. She'd been dying inside but didn't dare say a word. She'd even asked her brothers to come help, but as soon as they heard she'd offended the Hu mansion, they didn't dare show up. They just told her to behave and not anger the nobles. The past 2 days, at least Taidan had beaten Xielanting, giving her a little sense of victory. But today, she couldn't feel happy at all. Her anger made her dizzy, and she spent the whole afternoon cursing indirectly, finding fault with Arya for everything. She even kept making noise late into the night. I told the steward to go warn them, if you make one more sound, you won't need your tongues anymore. Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie finally quieted down. In the following days, Xielanting improved by leaps and bounds. Every day, he'd stop Taidan and beat him, chasing him around. At first, Taidan tried to fight back, but later he just hid from Xielanting every day. But the yard was only so big, there was nowhere to run. He got beaten every single day. Aunt Xie was beside herself with worry. Finally, one day, she couldn't take it anymore. She dropped to her knees in front of me, begging me to leave. We were wrong to him before, dog, cough, wrong to Lanting. But that's all in the past. You've hit us, you've gotten your anger out. Now he's beating Taidan every day, it's killing me. I told the steward to hand her a piece of paper. She took it, confused. Show this to your husband. If there's no problem, sign it. Early the next morning, Uncle Xie, who'd been hiding for days, came to see me. Like his brother, he could read and write. The paper stated that he admitted to beating and abusing Xielanting, and he needed to sign and press his fingerprint to confirm it. You want me to sign this confession? That's impossible, he snapped. If that's how he felt, there was nothing more to say. I wasn't a saint. I told Xielanting to beat Taidan even more every time he saw Taidan. He should hit him. If he saw Taidan hitting Arya, he should hit Taidan too, until Taidan was completely cowed. That night, we heard a fierce argument between Uncle Xie and Aunt Xie. The reason Uncle Xie refused to sign was that he still wanted to leech off the Hu mansion. His family had been poor for 10 generations, and his brother was the first one to make anything of himself. If he let this chance slip, he might never get out of this backwater village for the rest of his life. Aunt Xie screamed at him, saying he was acting like his life wasn't already on the line, still worrying about the future. She told him to get through the current crisis first, otherwise, he might even lose his son. That night, Uncle Xie's eyes looked terrifying. The steward said he gestured at Aunt Xie's neck with his hand, probably thinking about strangling her and blaming everything on her. It was only when Taidan stirred and Arya sat up, staring blankly at him, that he panicked and pulled his hand back, losing his nerve. He was quite calculating. As long as he got past his brother's anger, if his wife died, his brother would find him more wives. In the original story, no one ever found out about the grievances Xielanting had suffered. Uncle Xie's family mooched off the Hu mansion for years, and Xielanting's father even made Xielanting feel grateful to them. Xielanting's father wasn't a likable character in the book. He was a rough man, good at fighting wars but terrible at politics. He couldn't see the tension between his son and his brother at all. He just thought his son was cold-hearted and ungrateful. In the end, Xielanting had to scheme to take away Uncle Xie's land and break his legs to get revenge, but he'd waited years for it. By then, the once fierce and powerful enemy had become obsequious and fawning in the face of the grown, strong Xielanting. I doubted that revenge had brought him much satisfaction. If anything, it probably made him feel even more wronged. Thankfully, it wasn't too late to change things now. Xielanting still had time to become a good person, not a cruel one. The next day, Taidan led Arya to kneel in front of me. As soon as they knelt, They started kowtowing hard, their foreheads thudding against the ground. Tyden cried, "Aunt, please, don't let my dad kill my mom." "I didn't tell your dad to kill your mom, I just told him to sign a confession." "But he refused." "When did you see your dad trying to kill your mom?" "Last night. My dad put his hand around mom's neck like he wanted to strangle her." Tears streamed down his face. Arya cried too, but so softly, as if afraid to disturb us. In that moment, they looked like two poor little things. I told the steward to take them out, then glanced toward the inner room. "You're lucky your two kids saved your life last night, especially your daughter." She sat up and stared at Sierra, and that's why he stopped. Aunt Sierra looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. Like many women in this village or in this era, she'd dedicated her whole life to her family. She'd given her all to her husband, just wanting to make their lives better. She was selfish, foolish, even cruel, but it was all for her family. She'd hoped to rise with Sierra, but he saw her as a burden. Wanting to get ahead alone, "Siegenju, you bastard, you'll rot in the dirt with me," she said, then stormed off. That same day, she fetched her brothers, forced Sierra to sign the paper, and brought it to me. Then she pushed Arya in front of me. "I'll sell you this girl. I know you're kind, you've been so good to go to Lanting. You won't treat her badly. I'm selling her because I'm afraid her dad will change his mind someday and come looking for her. It's not that I want your money. Just one string of coins, one string. And you can take her. Mom, don't leave me," Arya sobbed. "I'll eat less. I'll work hard. I didn't mean to not help you that day. I was scared I'd delay washing the pots, so I didn't dare come watch the commotion." She cried bitterly. Aunt Sierra's expression was complicated. Her eyes turned red again and again, and she bit her lip hard. "I'm doing this for your own good. You'll never have a good life with me. I remember your kindness today. That's why I'm doing this, in case I forget someday." Her voice trailed off, and she froze. She was telling the truth. Human nature is complicated. Aunt Sierra had just gone through a terrible shock. Right now, she hated Sierra and remembered her daughter's kindness, so she wanted to give Arya a better future. But Sierra would definitely sweet-talk her later, and she'd definitely forget Arya's goodness. Then their lives would go back to how they were before. Sielanting quietly tugged my sleeve. His eyes filled with a plea. In the original story, besides the female lead, Arya was the only woman who'd ever been kind to Sielanting. He'd basically raised her, he'd changed her diapers when no one else would, and fed her porridge. When Arya got a little older, she'd secretly share her food with him. But by the time Sielanting grew up and seized power, Arya was already dead. She'd gotten a sudden illness, and Uncle Sierra and Aunt Sierra had ignored her. She'd bitten her lip to stay quiet, afraid of disturbing her parents, and by the next morning, she was already cold. After Sielanting punished Uncle Sierra's family, he'd gone back to the village and left bowls of meat on Arya's grave, meat she'd never gotten to eat in her life. Later, he'd met the female lead, who looked a little like Arya. At first, he'd seen her as a little sister. Later, she'd become his only source of warmth. I gave Aunt Sierra one tael of silver and had a slave contract drawn up, a permanent one. I didn't trust Uncle Sierra and Aunt Sierra. I was afraid that if I raised Arya like my own daughter, Uncle Sierra and Aunt Sierra would come back to take advantage, using moral pressure on her. I was also afraid that when Arya grew up, she'd be fooled by their sweet talk, recognize them as her parents, and make a fool of me. I wouldn't let anyone insult me like that, so I'd be the bad guy and cut off all future trouble at the source. With that matter settled, I took Sielanting and Arya to the village chief's house to talk about repaying the village. What I'd done to Sierra was to avenge Sielanting. But people's hearts change easily. In a few years, they might forget why I'd done it. They'd only remember that I'd beaten Sierra, and that Sielanting had disrespected his uncle and aunt. This was a society bound by strict rituals, and the emperor ruled by the principle of filial piety. Sielanting was meant to go far in life. I couldn't let the people or things in this village become obstacles in his growth. I proposed building a school for the village, with the Who mansion covering all the children's tuition fees. But I had one condition: the school must admit an equal number of boys and girls. For every boy enrolled, there must be one girl enrolled too. The village chief looked troubled. He couldn't understand why, in his eyes, only boys needed to study. They could become officials, government advisors, or local gentry. Even if they didn't succeed academically, they could find respectable jobs in the city, shopkeepers, accountants. There were countless benefits to boys being literate. Girls, however, had no path ahead except marriage. Studying for them was a waste. I didn't want to change his mind after all. I couldn't even bring myself to fully adapt to this society. Instead, I painted him a tempting picture. My husband is now a marquis. There's no telling if he might be promoted further in the future. Our mansion will need well-educated, well-mannered maids. Besides, if an opportunity ever arises, I glanced upward, letting the implication hang. It's better to have people from our own village. We know their roots. We trust them. The village chief's eyes widened, and he grew visibly excited. I'd barely started. But he seemed to have already imagined a future where someone from the village became an imperial concubine, returned in glory, and waved her hand to exempt the villagers from taxes for 3 years. "You're so thoughtful, madam. I'll make sure this gets done properly," he said eagerly. "There might still be people who refuse to listen," I warned. "Don't worry. Leave this to me. I'll handle it perfectly. Anyone who opposes will regret it. I have ways to deal with them." I felt reassured. In this era, a village chief held great power. He dealt with local gentry on matters like tax collection, conscription, road repairs, and canal digging. Below him, he oversaw every aspect of village life. Births and deaths, disputes, weddings and funerals all required his judgment. As long as he could see this through and get the children into school, I was more than willing to spend the money. With that matter settled, I took Sielanting and Eria back in a carriage. Moving at a leisurely pace, when we left, countless villagers came to see us off. They called me a living bodhisattva, praised Dr. Wang as a reincarnation of Hua Tuor, a legendary physician, said Sielanting was born with noble fate, and declared Eria lucky. People talked a lot. Anything that benefited me was good, anything that didn't was bad. So you could listen to public opinion, but there was no need to take it to heart. I smiled and said goodbye to the crowd. My gaze swept over them, finally landing on Uncle Sier and Aunt Sier. Their eyes filled with regret. They'd already heard about the school I was donating to the village. This time, their regret was real. They must have been thinking, if they'd treated Sielanting well back then, maybe that money would have gone to them instead. But there's no medicine for regret. The past always leaves traces in one's life. On the way back, Sielanting looked worried. "Building a school will cost a lot of money." "It will," I agreed. "That's why we'll have to work hard to earn more in the future. I'll save money on food and expenses," Sielanting said firmly, making up his mind. I couldn't help but laugh, seizing the chance to teach him about managing finances. "How exactly do you plan to save money?" He listed out ideas. He'd eat less, chop firewood, make charcoal, pick mushrooms, set traps to catch game, and even learn to collect medicinal herbs, all things he could sell for money. Eria, who had been quietly crying, perked up at this and joined in, speaking softly. "I can boil water, cook, wash pots, pull weeds, and fertilize the fields." They were such capable children, 2 sweethearts who deserved a good life ahead. "You're both so thoughtful, worrying about easing my burden. It makes me so happy. But the servants in the Who mansion already do all these things. If you take over, you'll be taking their jobs, and that will make them anxious. Besides, I don't want you to skimp on food or rest. Children need to eat well, sleep well, and grow strong. When we get back, you two will go to school too. You won't have time for these chores anymore. For now, your job is to stay healthy, eat well, and sleep well. That's how you can help me later." I'll give you a monthly allowance and teach you how to spend it wisely, and in the future, I'll teach you how to earn money. We'll take it step by step, no rush. Good days are waiting for us ahead. When we returned to the Hu mansion, I did 4 things. First, I told the steward to write a letter to Xie Lanting's father, detailing every bit of the abuse Xie Lanting had suffered. I wanted to be the first to speak up. No one would ever frame or slander me again. Second, I gave Area a new name, Xie Weixian. For now, she'd live with me. When she was a little older, she'd move to the Western Wing. Third, I asked the steward to sort out the Hu mansion's expenses. I wanted to see where exactly the mansion's money was being spent, so I could find ways to increase income and cut unnecessary costs. Fourth, I looked for a school for Xie Lanting and Xie Weixian, making arrangements for their enrollment. The Hu mansion had earned its title through military merit, and the Xie family had no deep roots in the capital. The only option was to send the children to a school run by another noble family. Xie Lanting was already older. Starting school late, he'd likely face some discrimination, but for now, there was no better choice. The original book never mentioned how Xie Lanting had gotten into school, but I had a hunch his time there hadn't been easy. He seemed to have everything going for him, a privileged background, remarkable talent, and striking looks, but the author had given him these gifts only so he could compete with the male lead, serve as a catalyst for the hero and heroine's relationship, and become an obstacle in their growth. The book described his suffering in detail, but glossed over his growth. Happiness was scarce in his life, while his flaws were fatal. So, if possible, I wanted to find him a new school. I analyzed several top schools in the capital, sifting through options until I set my sights on the Xie Family School, a prestigious institution run by a prominent Xie clan. First, I sent over a formal visit letter. When the appointed day arrived, I took Xie Lanting and Xie Weixian with me. Both children were exceptionally good-looking, dressed in fine clothes. They stood quietly by my side. Their eyes sparkled with curiosity, but they struggled to hold back from looking around recklessly. Their cleverness and obedience were enough to tug at anyone's heartstrings. I waited for about the time it takes to finish a cup of tea before being greeted by the eldest daughter-in-law of the Xie family, Madame Xie. She had a round, fair face with almond-shaped eyes and peach-colored cheeks, a very dignified and cheerful-looking woman. She smiled and apologized, explaining that her mother-in-law was unwell and had specially sent her to receive us. Her words were warm and polite, leaving no room for complaint. When she saw the 2 children, she praised them, adding that if their family's school weren't already full, she would definitely invite them to study there. She'd refused me before I even had a chance to bring up the topic. I understood at once. Though we shared the same surname, the other Xie family was an established, scholarly clan, and they clearly looked down on Xie Lanting's father, who'd risen from humble, peasant roots. They didn't want their children mixing with his, for fear they'd pick up bad habits. I exchanged polite pleasantries, left a gift, and avoided mentioning the school matter entirely. I only said that sharing the same surname made us kin, and as juniors, we'd come to pay our respects so that we wouldn't be strangers if we met later, which would be embarrassing. After leaving the Xie mansion, we climbed back into the carriage. Xie Weixian was still too young to understand. She'd enjoyed the good food and drinks and was in a happy mood. But Xie Lanting, who was unusually perceptive for his age, had a serious look in his eyes, filled with confusion. He was used to being looked down on, and he knew he'd been rejected again this time. Yet even though he was wearing fine clothes, he was still being looked down on, and he probably couldn't figure out why. The adult world is truly complicated. The rich look down on the poor, officials look down on merchants, established clans look down on newly wealthy nobles. Everyone has countless identities, and the social hierarchy is a tangled mess. He'd gradually understand all this when he grew up. For now, there was only one thing I wanted to teach him: to accept failure, for it would be a normal part of life. I pinched his cheek gently and smiled. Are you discouraged already? This is just the beginning. When you fall down at 5 years old, you cry your heart out. But when you look back at 15, you realize how silly you were then. When you fail an exam at 15, you think your life is over. But when you look back at 25, you see it wasn't that big a deal. When you get yelled at by your boss at 25, you fear you'll be fired. But when you look back at 35, you've already changed jobs many times and even fired a few incompetent bosses yourself. If you live long enough, you'll realize life is surprisingly forgiving of mistakes. So being rejected by the Xie clan wasn't a big deal at all. If I got rejected enough times, this one rejection would feel like a drop in the bucket. I took Xie Lanting to visit several other schools, but we were rejected without exception. On the way back, Xie Weixian couldn't smile anymore. She'd sensed that they weren't liked. Xie Lanting's little face fell, and he stared sadly out the carriage window. For me, though, this was nothing. Back in my past life, I'd sent out countless job applications and been rejected over and over. Then a terrible boss offered me a job. I knew he was bad. But I was desperate to find work and settle down, so I signed the contract anyway. In the end, he expected me to do the work of someone earning 10 times my salary of 3,000 yuan, and I'd worked myself to death. So the more rejections I faced, the less I panicked. Maybe fate was saving me from something worse. If I could build a school in the village, I could certainly build one in the Hu mansion too. What I wanted was for Xie Lanting and Xie Weixian to gain knowledge and skills, not necessarily to study at someone else's school. This was a crucial time for shaping their values. It was better to keep them by my side to teach them. When Xie Lanting truly needed a famous teacher in the future, he could earn that opportunity with his own abilities. I set aside a courtyard in the Hu mansion to use as a school, then hired a scholar surnamed Zhu to be their teacher. When Mr. Zhu first arrived, he'd misunderstood. He thought he'd been hired to teach at the prestigious Xie clan's school. When he realized it was the military Marquis Xie's mansion, his excitement visibly faded. But once he discovered that Xie Lanting had a photographic memory, all his disappointment vanished. His face lit up with ambition, as if thinking, I may have failed the imperial exams for 10 years, but my student will definitely top all 3 levels of the exams someday. Xie Weixian and I joined in to practice writing. I focused on learning traditional Chinese characters and holding a brush properly. Xie Weixian was just starting to learn to read and write. In the afternoons, we added martial arts and practical life skills classes. On Xie Weixian's first day of school, she cried, "Why do I have so many strokes in my name? Why does brother's name have so few?" she sobbed, wiping her tears with her little hands before struggling to keep writing. Xie Lanting and I laughed. Then Xie Lanting took the initiative to help teach her to write, gently patting her head. "Take it slow. Don't worry every time you pick up the brush. You're making progress." He was right. As long as you start, it's never too late. Time passed quickly. Every day at mealtimes, I'd ask the 2 children about their day, telling them to each share one happy thing and one unhappy thing. At first, they were shy and held back, but soon, they began asking me about my happy and unhappy moments too. We gave each other advice, listened to each other's worries, helped solve each other's problems, and broadened our horizons together. This became our daily routine. At the start of each month, I gave each of them 1 string of copper coins. I told them to save half and use the rest to buy things. If they didn't want to buy anything right away, they could save that half too, to put toward bigger purchases later. I made homemade savings books for them, where I recorded the money they deposited with me. I also gave each of them an expense book, so they could track where their money went. Every month, I set aside 3 days to take them around the city. I had them note down the prices of goods in the markets, then took them to the workshops that supplied the shops, so they could see the different costs from different sources. The 2 children were amazed. They realized that prices varied depending on the supply channel, and they regretted spending so much extra money on impulse from small vendors. Steward Liu didn't understand this. He thought these were things only lower-class people needed to know. Nobles should be learning poetry, calligraphy, music, chess, painting, and etiquette instead. Steward Liu was a good man. To make the Hu mansion seem more prestigious and grand, he'd been networking with stewards from other noble households lately, trying to learn how they managed their estates and what rules high-ranking families followed. He was very eager to improve. I knew his intentions were good. He was afraid that if Xie Lanting and Xie Weixian learned these common things, they'd be looked down on in the future. But what I wanted for them wasn't to be idle nobles or pampered ladies. I wanted them to be practical, hard-working people, not the kind of characters in books who lived only for love. I wanted them to be real, to have a connection to everyday life. I remembered a book I'd read once, about a prince who left the palace and discovered that flatbread was supposed to be warm. He'd only ever had cold flatbread in the palace. I also remembered an emperor who, after his dynasty fell and he became an ordinary person, finally learned that the royal household had been cheating him. He'd thought rice cost several taels of silver a catty, because that's what the palace staff had told him. If you don't understand the prices of daily goods, how can you understand the hardships of common people? Later generations often mocked Sima Zhong for asking, why don't they eat meat porridge? But in his mind, meat porridge was something every family should have. No one had ever taught him about the lives of ordinary people, yet he was expected to sympathize with their suffering. It was somewhat unreasonable. I said to Steward Liu, people must never forget their roots. We came from the fields. So we need to understand these things, whether they end up as officials or make a living on their own in the future. At the very least, they won't be cheated. They should always be able to keep track of their own finances. Steward Liu suddenly relaxed, as if a tight string in him had snapped. Madam, you're right. Lately, I've been influenced by others and forgotten how our family got to where we are. No matter how hard I try, I'll never be able to copy the rules of those noble families. Why bother making things hard for myself? He was absolutely right. We were ordinary people at heart. Living a relaxed, happy life was more than enough. Before we knew it, winter passed and spring arrived. Xie Lanting's father was back. After paying his respects to the emperor at the palace, he rushed back to the Hu mansion as fast as he could. As soon as he reached the gate, Steward Liu sent a servant running to tell me there was a woman following father, and she was holding his arm, looking very intimate with him. Xie Lanting's face darkened slightly. He was 10 years old now. Over the past year, with good food and care, he'd grown much taller, almost as tall as me. Hearing this news made him very unhappy. He had a kind of baby bird syndrome. Whoever saved him, he'd cling to and protect. It was a warm feeling, and it made me feel like I had a home in this strange world. But this trait could also lead him astray. If the person who saved him had been a bad person, he would have fallen into an abyss with no way out. Xie Weixian climbed into my arms and whispered, "Mother, don't be afraid." I stroked her little cheek. My heart felt like it was melting. "Let's go. Let's meet your father." Xie Lanting's father was originally named Xie Suizhu, but now he'd changed his name to Xie Zhensheng. I couldn't remember if there was a scene in the original book where he brought a woman back. He and the original mistress were just background characters, only there to highlight how ruthless Xie Lanting was. They barely got any attention, but after living in this ancient world for a year, I had my own plans. This time, I just wanted to see what kind of person Xie Zhensheng was, so I could make the right plans for the future. The title of Madam Who was quite useful. It had saved me from a lot of trouble, especially since Xie Zhensheng was fighting at the front. Almost no one in the capital dared to offend me. If I lost this status, doing business would become much harder. If possible, I still wanted to continue cooperating with him, but our meeting with Xie Zhensheng was not a pleasant one. As soon as he saw me, he snapped coldly. "I risked my life to build the Xie family's fortune. And you do something so shameless. Do you even have any respect for me?" He threw a pile of paper slips at my feet. I glanced down at them. Today's grand sale, 30% off for purchases over 200 coins. Flower Festival Beauty Festival, 30% off on fresh, fine goods. Year-end points redemption, exchange for various fine items for free. These were all the promotions I'd run for my shop's membership systems, point systems, and various holiday sales. My business had been thriving, at first. Many people mocked me, but now many were copying my ideas, single-handedly. I'd revolutionized marketing strategies in the capital and made a fortune in the process. I thought that was pretty impressive, but Xie Zhenxing, he was impossible. He'd convicted me without even asking for an explanation. Even when interrogating a criminal, there's a proper process. Any thought of continuing to cooperate with him vanished. I said calmly, if the marquis looks down on what I've done, then let's divorce. Xie Zhenxing froze. The woman behind him froze too. Xie Lanting panicked for a moment, but quickly calmed down. He glanced at his father and said coolly, I'm going with mother. Xie Weixian blinked her innocent big eyes and whispered, Mother, when are we leaving? I patted their little heads gently. We'll pack our things right now. We'll stay at the villa on the outskirts of the capital for a while first. I've hired a teacher who knows all about plants and herbs. You two can study with him for a bit. Later, we'll move the school there too. Steward Liu looked at me, then at Xie Zhenxing, and said respectfully, Madam, I'll go with you too. I'm sure you'll still need a steward. We'll go with you too, madam. Don't leave us behind. A group of maids and servants hurried to say, afraid I'd abandon them. Xie Zhenxing finally lost his composure. Do none of you have any respect for me, the marquis? Of course not. A long time ago, I'd returned their slave contracts to them one by one as rewards. They were free now, they really could leave if they wanted to. But their willingness to go with me showed their trust and admiration for me. Even so, I didn't want to drag them into danger. There was no need to provoke a general who was currently in the emperor's good graces. I said, Marquis, let's talk. Xie Zhenxing snorted coldly, gave me a sideways glance, then strode inside. The woman followed closely behind him, making no attempt to avoid suspicion. I didn't want our conversation to spiral out of control because of her presence. I stopped her and said, Miss, are you sure you want to watch me argue with the marquis? When I leave, you'll be the one staying here. What if one day the marquis remembers you saw him lose his temper and make a fool of himself? Your life in the Hu mansion won't be easy then. The girl snapped back to her senses, quickly stopped in her tracks, and forced a smile. Brother Xie, I'll wait for you here. Xie Zhenxing's cheeks turned slightly pink. He clearly enjoyed the attention, but when he came to his senses, he glared at me, obviously annoyed that I'd called his anger a foolish sight. Me. Never in a million years did I expect to end up with the general brings home a woman plotline. Too bad I had no interest in acting it out. Xie Zhenxing and I sat down to talk in the pavilion. I didn't want to go inside. Closed spaces felt oppressive. Being outside, with more room to breathe, would make it easier to talk. Xie Zhenxing frowned and looked around. The more he looked, the more relaxed his expression became. He must have noticed how much the Hu mansion had changed. When the mansion was first granted to us, it was dilapidated. With the Hu family's original finances, we could only barely fix it up. It was after I made money that I hired people to redesign and renovate it completely. At the time, my thinking was simple. Even if we might not live here long, life was for ourselves. I wanted to be comfortable. More importantly, during the renovation, I'd taken Xie Lanting and Xie Weixian with me every step of the way, comparing designs, finalizing plans, buying materials, calculating costs, hiring workers, and overseeing the start of construction. We'd run into problems during the work and solved them together, staying busy from start to finish. That experience was invaluable. Now, the two children were tired but happy. They had a basic understanding of construction processes, were skilled at calculating accounts, could confidently name the approximate prices of various building materials. and no longer felt shy about haggling with people. Their life skills had improved tremendously. It made everything feel worth it. Xie Zhensheng had probably just received praise from the emperor. He was still full of arrogance. His voice was cold, and he spoke with the arrogance of someone who thought he'd seen through my tricks. You don't need to throw a fit. You begged to be my second wife back then. Now that I've made a name for myself, why would you let go? I won't demote you to concubine. You don't have to lose face like that. But from now on, you're not allowed to do that kind of work anymore. Hand over all those shops to the stewards to manage. Stay in the inner quarters and be a proper noble lady. Stop putting yourself on display for everyone to see. The girl I brought back is surnamed Gu. She's the daughter of one of my subordinates. I'll take her as a noble concubine. Prepare for her entry into the mansion. Every word was an order. I had no idea how he and the original mistress had met. I didn't even know if they'd ever slept together. I had no memories of that from the original mistress at all. But none of that mattered anymore. I said calmly, Marquis. Don't you want to hear about Lanting first? I read about it in your letter. My second brother was wrong, but family shame shouldn't be made public. You made such a big fuss that he can't stay in the village anymore, and I'll have no face to go back either. You handled this wrong. You could have dealt with it quietly, but you had to make a spectacle of it, letting everyone know, you're from a poor background. You don't know how to handle things properly. From now on, Miss Gu will teach you. He glared at me coldly, not only blaming me, but also trying to humiliate me, reducing me to a puppet in his inner quarters. How had the Xielanting in the book not killed him? If that's how you feel, then there's nothing more to say. Let's divorce. I won't hold on to the title of Madam Who and embarrass you. I waved a maid over, asking for brush and ink, then began to write a divorce letter. I'd learned to write traditional characters from Mr. Ju, but classical Chinese was still hard for me. I'd asked Mr. Ju to write a divorce letter for me beforehand, and I'd memorized it in case I needed it. Mr. Ju's expression had been priceless when I asked. He'd thought he'd misheard. It was only after I urged him repeatedly that he confirmed my request. After that, he'd looked at me with a newfound respect. Scholars had pride. They admired people who didn't crave power and status. He thought I was one of those people. But in reality, I just wanted to live comfortably. I'd come into this book knowing the Xie family wasn't a good place to be, but I'd still hesitated to jump to conclusions. Meeting Xie Zhensheng had left me disappointed. I'd originally thought he was a noble, upright general, just someone who wasn't good at noticing what went on in the inner quarters. But now it seemed he was arrogant and self-righteous, convinced he was always right. I even suspected that his victories in battle and his title as marquis might have been due to Xie Lanting's plot armor. The story needed a male second lead with a noble background, one that was slightly inferior to the male leads. Xie Zhensheng, who'd risen from humble origins through military merit, was the perfect fit. His true character might have always been like this. I finished writing the divorce letter, signed my name, and slid the paper toward Xie Zhensheng. He stared at it expressionlessly, his tiger-like eyes narrowing slightly. You can write, he said, surprised. I've been learning from the tutor these days. I replied, you really want a divorce? Do you forget you had nothing when you came here? Leave the Hu mansion, and you'll be nothing. Just sign it, Marquis. I have my own plans. Xie Zhensheng snorted coldly. He picked up the brush, ready to sign, but at the last moment, he threw it down. I almost fell for your trick. I just returned victorious, and if I divorce my wife now, the imperial censors will accuse me of being heartless and unrighteous. Who put you up to this? Are you trying to ruin my reputation? He had a brain, all right, but he was overcomplicating things. Keep the divorce letter. We can sign it later if you want. I'll leave the account books and steward Liu here so you can check the finances. I'll take the children to the villa on the outskirts for a while. We won't disturb you. When did we get a villa on the outskirts? Did you accept bribes behind my back? He glared at me angrily. It's from my dowry. Lies. You had nothing when you came. I had something, a plain silver hairpin. It wasn't much, but it was mine. If you want to check the accounts, ask Steward Liu. No need to be so suspicious. That silver hairpin was worth 1 tael of silver. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start growing my wealth. At first, I sold some recipe formulas. Later, I started developing soap, perfume, and daily necessities. Then I figured out how to distill strong liquor. These ventures had made me a fortune. I'd kept careful records of all the Hu Mansion's assets, just in case this day came. Though I had used some of the Hu Mansion's money to raise Xie Lanting and Xie Weixian, he provided the funds, I provided the care. It was a form of co-parenting. In a way, I packed our things and left the Hu Mansion with the 2 children that afternoon. Xie Lanting felt no attachment to his father, which infuriated Xie Zhenxing. He blamed me for failing to teach the child properly. He coldly ordered Xie Lanting to stay, but Xie Lanting only stared back at him, his eyes cold. No, where mother goes, I go. Xie Weixian clung tightly to Xie Lanting, eyeing her uncle warily. I got out of the carriage, holding a riding whip, and said coldly, "You can make Lanting get out of the carriage if you're willing to take 128 lashes from me. If you do, I'll leave Lanting here without you saying another word." Why should I? Because Xie Lanting endured 128 lashes from his second uncle, while his own father thinks that's no big deal. You can't tell someone to be kind until you've walked in their shoes. If you can take 128 lashes and still not resent me, then everything you say from now on will be right. Sure, whatever you say, but I won't listen. Xie Zhenxing stepped forward in disbelief, pulled open Xie Lanting's clothes, and saw the faint white scars crisscrossing his back. These were the ones that had faded but still remained. There must have been many more that hadn't left marks. Xie Zhenxing froze. Xie Lanting closed his clothes expressionlessly and climbed back into the carriage. I pushed Xie Zhenxing aside and followed. Xie Weixian quickly pulled down the curtain, urging the driver, "Hurry, let's go." The driver shouted and snapped the whip. The sound of hooves tapping on the bluestone road was clear and pleasant. Xie Lanting lay down fully clothed inside. I didn't know what he was thinking, but when I touched his cheek, my hand came away wet with tears. He held back a sob and whispered, so softly I could barely hear, "He sent me a kite once. Tiden stole it. I thought, when he came back, he'd help me get it back." Instead, his father had brushed off the abuse he'd suffered as if it didn't matter. It was a bitter blow. After the carriage left the city, a rider galloped past us. It was Xie Zhenxing. He didn't stop. At the crossroads ahead, he turned toward his hometown. The next day, Steward Liu sent a servant to report that Xie Zhenxing had gone back to his hometown and beaten Sierra again. Xie Lanting heard this but acted as if he hadn't, but he was clearly lighter in spirit. That afternoon, during his plant identification class with the teacher, he was sharp and answered every question flawlessly. The teacher was amazed, calling him a prodigy. The teacher even considered taking him as a disciple, but then remembered he was just an apothecary and gave up. Though he taught Xie Lanting even more diligently, we stayed on the outskirts of the capital for over a month. Summer arrived before we knew it, and the area was cool and pleasant, so we decided to stay until autumn. But at the end of summer, Xie Zhenxing sent someone to ask me to return. He planned to take Miss Gu as his concubine, and he needed me, the main wife, to oversee the wedding rituals. I was speechless. I'd known this divorce wouldn't be easy. Even in modern times, with laws to rely on, divorce was hard. In ancient times, a woman who wanted a divorce would have to fight tooth and nail. I sorted through my assets, thinking about how to get the divorce smoothly. Xie Lanting asked me, "Mother, do you really want a divorce? Is father that bad?" I hesitated. To many women, Xie Zhenxing would have been a good match. Lately, people in the capital had been saying I was lucky marrying Xie Zhenxing when I was poor, then becoming a noble lady overnight. They called me ungrateful. The marquis only wanted to take a concubine, not divorce me. I was just being unreasonable. But what I wanted wasn't a marriage. I'd originally thought that if Xie Zhenxing was a decent person, we could cooperate for our mutual benefit. But the moment I saw him trying to boss me around and control me, that thought vanished. It was hard for the two children to accept, and hard to explain. I thought for a moment, then said, "No matter what happens between your father and me, I will always be your mother. After the divorce, you'll have two homes. You can go to whichever one you want. I understand. Mother, do what you want to do, don't worry about me and my sister," Xie Lanting said. Nodding firmly, early the next morning, the steward hurried to tell me that Xie Lanting had ridden a horse back to the city. He'd left in a rush and told the servants not to inform me. The steward, worried, had sent a servant to follow him and then rushed to report to me at once. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. I hurried to catch up. By the time I arrived at the Hu mansion, out of breath, I found Xie Zhenxing and Xie Lanting facing off against each other, father and son like bitter enemies. Glaring furiously at one another, Xie Lanting clutched a knife tightly, pressing its tip to his own chest, forcing Xie Zhenxing to sign the divorce letter. Xie Zhenxing's face turned bright red with anxiety, like a cooked shrimp. He snapped angrily, "This is rebellion. Have you no sense of honor? What kind of son forces his father to divorce his wife? Put that knife down at once. You don't deserve mother," Xie Lanting retorted. "Sign the divorce letter today. And I'll still recognize you as my father. If you don't, from now on, I'll only have mother, you ungrateful wretch. Is this how Song Chunhua taught you? You've only learned the ways of a rude market woman from her. I regret ever taking her in. Mother's name is Song Jiari, a peerless beauty, whose smile and frown are both charming. If she hadn't saved me, all you'd be seeing now is a corpse. What right do you have to speak of her like that?" Those words seemed to strike a nerve in Xie Zhenxing. He stared at Xie Lanting in anguish, his body swaying slightly. Then, he sank onto a chair in a daze, knocking over a chessboard. Chess pieces scattered across the floor. Xie Lanting, still young and soft-hearted at core, hesitated. He wondered if he'd said the wrong thing, if he'd hurt his father too deeply, and Xie Zhenxing seized that split second, with a flick of his wrist. Two chess pieces flew through the air. One knocked the knife from Xie Lanting's hand, the other hit his arm. Xie Lanting stumbled back, clutching his arm, a mix of pain and anger on his face. Xie Zhenxing said coldly, "Daring to threaten a general, on the battlefield, I could have killed you 10 times over." He then turned his gaze to me. "Are you satisfied now?" Watching father and son turn on each other, I let out a long breath, striding quickly to Xie Lanting's side. I rolled up his sleeve to check his arm only to find a bruise, no cut to the flesh. The worry weighing on my chest finally lifted. I gave him a light flick on the forehead, then stood in front of him to shield him, facing Xie Zhenxing. Satisfied, my son is loyal and righteous, brave enough to protect his mother. Even knowing you hold such high status as a marquis, he still mustered up the courage to stand up for me. A child with such unyielding integrity. I adore him. Are you not satisfied? Marquis, he's being disobedient, Xie Zhenxing roared. That's because you were in the wrong. If you'd agreed to the divorce earlier, none of this would have happened. Xie Zhenxing snapped. He slammed his fist on the table. When I was just a lowly officer, you begged to be with me. Now that I'm a marquis, how dare you ask for a divorce? If anyone is to end this marriage, it should be me. Divorcing you. My eyes darkened. He was refusing to listen to reason, even when offered a way out. If that's how you feel, then there's nothing more to say between us. Xie Zhenxing paced back and forth, fuming. Why won't you talk to me? We both came from humble beginnings. Do you look down on me too? I'm mocked by others outside, and now I have to put up with your nonsense at home. You're just being difficult because you have too much time on your hands. You'll stay here and reflect on your mistakes. He locked me and Xie Lanting in the ancestral hall. It was almost laughable. The Xie family had come from poverty, they'd never had an ancestral hall before. This one had been part of the mansion the emperor had granted us, and I'd even spent money to have it renovated. I took a ruler from a table, my voice cold. "Hold out your hand." Xie Lanting's eyes widened in alarm. His eyes reddened quickly, but he lowered his head and obediently held out his hand. I tapped it lightly with the ruler. "Do you know what you did wrong today? I shouldn't have snuck back to see father on horseback without telling you. That's not it. Try again," I said, tapping his hand once more. "I shouldn't have disobeyed father." "Still wrong," I said, tapping his stubborn little head this time. Xie Lanting couldn't figure it out, or maybe he had the answer but was afraid to say it. He looked up at me anxiously, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I put down the ruler, placing both hands on his shoulders. I held his gaze firmly, so he couldn't look away. "You made 2 mistakes today. The one that angers me most is that you dared to use your own life to threaten your father. I only ever taught you to value yourself, to cherish your life, not to treat it so lightly. Did you really think your life could right all the wrongs in this world? Thank goodness you didn't succeed today. But if you had, what would you do the next time something doesn't go your way? Would you gamble with your life again, hoping to stir someone's conscience?" Xie Lanting, this is what disappoints me most about you. In the original plot, he'd schemed to get himself and the male lead stranded together, just to see who the female lead would choose. In the end, the female lead had found the male lead first and never knew he was also stranded. He'd refused to speak up about his predicament. Convinced he'd been abandoned, that was when he turned bitter, taking revenge on the male lead and imprisoning the female lead, acting as if the world had wronged him, ready to throw his life away at the slightest provocation. He had to break this terrible habit now. Tears rolled down Xie Lanting's cheeks. "Mother, I just wanted to help you, and that's the second mistake. You don't get to make decisions for me. You can't bear the weight of my fate. I'm an adult. And this is my matter, I will solve it myself. I have more ways to handle this than you know. If I need your help, I'll ask for it. I don't need you to rush in and solve things for me. You met me a good person. When you make decisions for me, I'll thank you. But what if you meet someone who's cruel? If you rush to fight their battles for them, you'll get nothing when things go well. But if things go wrong, that person won't be grateful, they'll blame you for overstepping. Can you bear that consequence? The only thing you need to do is walk your own path, decide your own fate, and gather enough cards to stand your ground in life. Don't step into a fight with nothing but your life to bet on. That's not courage, that's recklessness." Xie Lanting had resorted to threatening his father with his life because he had nothing else to offer. But before you sit down at life's table, you need to have cards to play and a backup plan. If you have nothing, it's better to stay away. Jumping in blindly is just gambling, hoping for luck to save you, and luck is never a reliable winning strategy. I asked Xie Lanting, "Do you understand your mistake now?" He nodded heavily. "Yes, mother." Stand in the corner and repeat what I just said 50 times until it's engraved in your mind. Xie Lanting went to face the wall and reflect. I unfolded a wide table, which transformed into a bed. Then I took 2 thick quilts from the cabinet under the altar and made the bed. Next, I fetched several tins of snacks, pine nuts, melon seeds, and started eating. I hadn't had breakfast, and I was really hungry now. Xie Lanting heard the commotion, turned around, and stared at me in disbelief, finished repeating. "Come eat if you are," I said, patting the cushion beside me and spitting out a melon seed shell. Xie Lanting gaped. "Mother, is this allowed? You can also choose to kneel properly if you prefer." Xie Lanting shut his mouth, walked over, and sat on the cushion. He cracked melon seeds and pine nuts, his mood lifting noticeably. When Steward Liu had suggested renovating the ancestral hall earlier, I'd initially wanted to refuse. But after thinking about it, I'd agreed. Ancestral halls are classic high-drama props in romance novels, and I'd figured that with Xie Lanting's temperament, He'd end up locked in one sooner or later, and I'd probably be locked in with him. So I'd simply furnished it like a second bedroom, bed, quilts, snacks, everything one might need. I just hadn't expected to actually end up being locked in here. Sigh. I'd given Sielanting a lesson on values. And once I was sure he'd really taken it to heart and I'd grown tired of snacks, I opened a hidden door. Outside was a bamboo grove in the ancestral hall's backyard, quiet and secluded. From here, we could walk freely to any part of the Hu mansion. Sielanting was stunned. Mother, why is there a door here? Let me teach you another lesson today. A wise rabbit has 3 burrows. Always plan for the worst and leave yourself an escape route. You stay here and reflect. I'm going back to sleep. Wait for my good news. Within 3 days, your father will be begging me for a divorce. I pulled the bookshelf back to close the door, leaving Sielanting alone in the ancestral hall. Then returned to my bedroom to sleep. By September, the weather had grown cool. I slept soundly, and when I woke up, I heard noisy commotion from the front courtyard. I knew the moment I'd been waiting for had arrived. I took a detour to the ancestral hall, and sure enough, I heard Xie confronting Sielanting again at the front gate, only this time, their roles were reversed. Xie wanted to enter the ancestral hall to let me out, but Sielanting had locked it tight. Refusing to let him in. Want to get mother out? Dream on. Sielanting snapped. When you locked her in here, you didn't care about being wrong. Now that you need her help, you come begging. Forget it. Sielanting, open this door. No. Xie was so angry he looked ready to faint. Realizing he couldn't reason with Sielanting, he turned to speak to me instead. Song Chun. Cough. Song Jiari. The princess dowager sent someone over. She said you promised her a certain formula. Hurry up and come out to handle this. I opened the hidden door, stepped into the ancestral hall, and said coldly, Marquis, please go back. Help me tell the princess dowager that I'm unwell. I'm afraid I'll have to break my promise about the formula. Please ask her to forgive me. Xie paced anxiously. He'd only been a marquis for a year or 2, and during that time, he'd been constantly looked down on in the capital. Deep down, he was terrified of offending powerful nobles, especially the princess dowager. He snapped, Song Jiari, there's a limit to your willfulness. Is this the time to be stubborn? Hurry up and come out. Then why don't you order someone to break down the door? Oh, right, there are ancestral tablets behind the door. Be careful when you chop it down. Don't crush the tablets, or the Xie ancestors might come haunt you at night. Song Jiari. No wonder the books say only women and petty men are hard to deal with. Don't think I'm afraid of you. I'll go refuse the princess dowager right now. Good. While you're at it, refuse the Marchioness of Bohien, the young mistress of the Xie clan, the Duchess of Angua, the Marchioness of Chengen. I reeled off 6 or 7 names in a row. Xie froze, staring blankly for a long time. Sielanting peeked out through a crack in the door and whispered, Father's world seems to be falling apart. Of course his world was falling apart. Among those people were true royal relatives, his superior officers, his colleagues, and respected scholarly nobles. He couldn't afford to offend a single one. He'd only been a noble for a year or 2, and most of that time he'd been fighting outside the capital. He'd only had a few months to interact with the capital's powerful figures, and he had no idea how to handle a situation like this. In this sense, we were operating on unequal information, and I was taking advantage of that. I said calmly, Lanting, this is what I'm teaching you today. Make as many friends as possible, and as few enemies as possible. A great man once said that, never confront someone head-on unless you have to. Use others' strength to achieve your goals, and prioritizing your own safety is always first. Besides, if you can achieve a win-win situation, there's no need to fight to the death. Marquis, don't you agree? Xie said nothing. Instead, he slipped a divorce letter through the crack in the door. His signature was already on it. I opened the door and was met with his ashen face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. With an angry snort, he turned and stormed off. I went to the main hall, handed several diagrams to the Princess Dowager, then saw her out and thanked her. She said coldly, "I came here today thinking I'd be backing you up to stop General Xie from taking a concubine. I never expected I'd be helping you get a divorce, Song Jiari. You even dare to use me, you have quite the nerve." I smiled gently. "Your Highness, I've included 3 extra diagrams for you. 2 of them are just ways to make money, but this one is of the utmost importance." It was a map marking the location of a coal mine. My hometown in the modern world was a small city with few good jobs, but it had a coal mine. Most people there thought the best job you could get was working in that mine. When I was a child, I visited relatives in a mining area. I envied the local children so much, and I even followed them to watch the mine from a distance. Having traveled into this book, I'd done everything I could to gather more cards in my hand. Beyond teaching the children and running businesses, I'd also searched for exploitable resources in the storied towns, mountains, villages with the same names as places I knew, combining my past experiences, the geography I'd studied, and sending people to investigate. I'd finally confirmed the location of this coal mine. It was an excellent card to hold. Now, I'd been forced to play it to get a divorce, but it was worth it. The Princess Dowager took the map, her voice calm. "I owe you a favor. After your divorce, I'll look out for you. If you ever have another deal this worthwhile, remember to come to me. I like smart people who plan for themselves." She boarded her carriage and left. I let out a long breath, then sent someone to deliver the promised items to the other ladies. After finishing all this, I drank a large cup of water, finally feeling a sense of relief. Suddenly, I heard Xie Zhenqing's deep voice behind me. "Today, I finally see how efficient you are at getting things done. If you'd already prepared an escape route, why didn't you talk to me properly? If you'd explained the pros and cons clearly, I wouldn't have refused to let you go. Why did you have to make such a scene?" "Marquis Xie, do you find it easy to communicate with Lanting?" I asked. Xie Zhenqing's face flushed with embarrassment, as if I'd asked the obvious. I said calmly, "Talking to you is just as hard. You have your own set of logic, I can't change it, and I don't want to. Today's results are the consequence of yesterday's choices. You'll have to get used to reaping what you sow." Xie Zhenqing opened his mouth, set down the divorce document, which had already been registered at the government office, and turned to leave. He took a few steps, then paused, turning back with a confused look. "I still don't understand why you insisted on a divorce. Is it really because I wanted to take a concubine?" His face was full of confusion. He truly didn't get it, since he was Xie Lanting's biological father, and I needed to discuss visitation rights with him later. I could at least let him understand why this had ended. "Marquis, do you want to talk properly?" I asked. He nodded. "I have one condition. Don't speak to me in an accusatory tone. If you can do that, I'll talk to you. Today has been full of events, and I have a lot on my mind. Maybe we can actually have a real conversation. After today, I'm afraid I'll never have the energy to talk about this again. I suspect you feel the same." Xie Zhenqing agreed at once. The maids and servants quickly set up a table with tea, then retreated. Clouds drifted lazily across the sky. The steam from the tea curled gently upward. My thoughts wandered, and my mood felt like a small boat swaying on the water, leisurely yet hiding an undercurrent of tension. I took a sip of tea. "Marquis, why do you want to take a wife and concubines? So this is what you care about. All the nobles in the capital do this, why can't I?" I put down my teacup and stood up to leave. I was wrong. Give me another chance, I just couldn't change my habit for a moment. Xie Zhenqing broke out in a sweat, hurrying to stop me. I said, "Marquis, I want a divorce because I know what life with you would be like. From the moment you came home, you never asked how I'd gotten through these years. You assumed I'd been living comfortably in the capital, with no hardships at all. You never asked how Lanting and I got along. You assumed we'd have no conflicts, and if we did, You'd surely blame both of us equally, wouldn't you? Xie Zhenqing's face turned ugly, but he didn't refute me. I knew I'd guessed right. My own family had been like this. When problems arose, my father would always blame my mother first, and my mother would then take it out on me. It was a perfect example of the kick the cat effect. Xie Zhenqing was the same. The only difference was that neither Lanting nor I had any status in his eyes, so he'd punish us both. If I didn't divorce you, I'd have to accept your concubines. Honestly, that wouldn't bother me much. As you said, all the nobles in the capital take concubines, especially a newly promoted one like you. Countless people are eager to marry their daughters into your household. The day you came back, I thought about discussing a cooperation with you. I didn't care how many concubines you took, because only someone who loves you would care about that. I don't love you, so it didn't matter to me. Xie Zhenqing looked even more embarrassed. He seemed unable to believe I didn't love him after all. The original mistress had begged him to take her with him so shamelessly. How could she not love him? I continued. But when you accused me without listening to my side of the story, without asking for an explanation, I realized I couldn't cooperate with you. Because you don't see me as a person, you see me as your property. But husband and wife are supposed to be equals, a team. What I want is respect, equality, for you to ask about the facts first, to give me a chance to speak instead of convicting me the moment you see me. If you don't treat me as your wife, you can never be my husband, but everyone else does it this way. General, why do you fight? If you're only fighting to have beautiful wives and concubines, to hold great power, then you can follow those nobles, enjoy your achievements, grow arrogant and indulgent. But if you want a real home, you have to make choices, because sincerity can only be exchanged for sincerity. There's no reason for me to respect you when you treat me so poorly. I paused, then added, besides, when you're humiliated by those nobles, you come back and take your anger out on us, yet you still want to be like them. Do you really think they're in the right? Life is something you live for yourself. Copying them won't make you happy, at least not in my book. He tried to discipline me with the same rules used to control women in this era, but he was destined to fail. Bad luck for him, to meet someone like me, but also good luck for him. Meeting me meant his family would at least avoid being wiped out in the future. I waited for a long time, watching Xie Zhenqing stand there stunned, unable to say a word. Bored, I stood up to leave. As I reached the door, Xie Zhenqing finally seemed to snap out of his daze. His voice was hoarse, as if he was forcing the words out of his chest. I was a poor man who suddenly became rich. I really don't know how to be a marquis. I could only copy others. Now that I think about it, I didn't even copy them well. I'm sorry. Then think carefully. General, why are your soldiers willing to fight for you? Why did so many people die? Yet you were the one who got promoted to marquis. Every person has both divinity and darkness within them. There's a reason you stood out from the rest. No one can help you figure that out. You have to understand it for yourself. I strode away, not looking back. At the corner, I saw Xie Lanting. He stepped forward, threw himself into my arms, and hugged me tightly. Mother, if you leave, what will I do? In ancient times, a woman couldn't take her children with her after a divorce. Xie Lanting wasn't even my biological son, he was Xie Zhenqing's. I couldn't take him with me. The only one I could take was Xie Weixian. Fearing that I might fall out with Xie Zhenqing over the divorce, I'd never formally adopted Weixian as my daughter, so she was still legally mine and could go with me. I patted Xie Lanting's back gently. I'll talk to your father. I'll make sure you can come see me whenever you want. What will you have to give up this time? Xie Lanting asked. His eyes filled with, he was thinking about the profitable formulas and diagrams I'd given away as favors. But I smiled softly. You're worth it. Anything I do for you is worth it. Compared to you, all those things are worthless. Xie Lanting's tears soaked through my clothes. Mother, go. I promise I'll study hard and pass the imperial exams soon. When I do, I'll definitely come see you. I swear I won't make you wait long. I slapped his shoulder lightly. You silly boy. Are you trying to cut ties with me? Can't you come see me if you don't pass the exams? I bought a house just one street away from yours. Did you break your legs and can't walk to my place? Just because I divorced your father, you're not gonna call me mother anymore. You wanna be an ungrateful wretch. Xie Lanting laughed through his tears. Mother, I'll be filial to you for the rest of my life. His words were as sweet as honey. I hoped that when he met someone he liked in the future, he'd be just as sweet-talking. On the day I left the Hu mansion, I drew up documents for all the things I couldn't take with me and left them to Xie Lanting. Xie Zhenxing didn't want to take advantage of me, saying he'd pay me for their value, but when he found out how much they were worth, he awkwardly withdrew his words, as if he'd never said them. From now on, Lanting can come see you whenever he wants, no need to ask me first. If you ever need help, you can come to me too. Think of it as repayment for raising Lanting. After our talk that day, I'd felt a strange sense of respect from him, a respect usually reserved for scholars. Maybe my words had really shocked him. This made me feel a little ashamed. These principles were common knowledge in the modern world. It was just the information gap between eras. From then on, I became a happy, single, wealthy woman. I brought Xie Weixian to live with me, formally registering her under my name and changing her surname to Song Weixian. When Song Weixian first returned to the city, she cried in anger. Her brother who'd run away, her mother who'd disappeared, and her who'd been left behind. Just thinking about it at the villa made her want to cry. After coming back, she made me swear to take her with me wherever I went. I told her, before you turn 18, I'll take you with me whenever it's convenient, but after 18, I can't promise that anymore. To Song Weixian, 18 seemed like a lifetime away, so she agreed happily. She added, you can't leave me behind more than 3 times a month. I thought she was the sweetest thing. She was being so generous with the number of times I could leave her. Every time I snuck out for midnight snacks after she fell asleep, I'd lecture her seriously the next morning about not eating too many sweets, fried foods, or barbecued treats. See, mother never eats these, I'd say. Song Weixian would pout but still nod earnestly. Then I won't eat them either. Now I understood the joy of raising a daughter. That is, until one day when I came back late and found her still awake. She pulled open my mouth and smelled the barbecue on my breath. My world came crashing down. I had no choice but to promise her that we'd eat barbecue, sweets, and fried foods once a week. As for Xie Lanting, he'd come to my place every day after class. We'd learn about business together, practice martial arts, draft plans, brainstorm ideas, and organize events. He made rapid progress. My divorce from his father seemed to have matured him a lot. It's true, parental divorce is a major turning point in a child's life, but he had to figure it out on his own, and I believed he could. Before long, Mr. Zhu, their former tutor, came to see me too. He was furious, saying that the new Mrs. Xie Jiu Rushuang had cut his salary. She thought it was too extravagant to pay so much for a tutor who only taught one child, not to mention giving him a separate teaching space, so she'd cut back on many of his benefits. Mr. Zhu had grown used to good treatment, so he couldn't accept this new arrangement. I could actually understand Jiu Rushuang, though. She'd finally married Xie Zhenxing not as a concubine, but as the proper Mrs. Xie. But after taking over the Hu mansion, she'd realized that such a large estate and grand lifestyle required a lot of money to maintain. Xie Zhenxing wasn't very good at making money. He could only rely on imperial rewards, and those wouldn't last forever. The Hu mansion's finances were tight, so cutting expenses made sense even if the person being cut wasn't happy about it. I simply suggested that Mr. Zhu come work as a tutor for me instead. I planned to let Xie Lanting take the counter-level imperial exam that year to become a scholar. Once he made a name for himself, I wanted to seriously establish an academy. Good academies were still scarce in this era, and I wanted to try building an education group in the future. Everyone who graduated from it would be part of my network. I knew clearly that relying on favors from Xiejunxing or benefits from powerful people was unstable. Only cultivating talented people myself would be a long-term investment. Mr. Zhu agreed at once. He went back to tell Jiu Rushuang, who was both happy and annoyed. She thought I was deliberately humiliating her. She came to see me, but I refused to meet her. I just had someone pass along a message. With my current wealth, I can afford to hire tutors surnamed Zhao, Chen, Sun, Li, even all the surnames in the 100 family surnames. If Madam doesn't want to let Mr. Zhu go, I won't force you. Jiu Rushuang froze for a moment. When she went back, she immediately packed up Mr. Zhu and sent him to me, not saying another word. Everyone was happy in the end. I told Xielanting, this is what they call a win-win situation. Xielanting nodded, half understanding. So if I pass the exam and become a scholar, that'll make it an even bigger win for you. He'd grown taller than me now. Teenage boys really do grow fast. No wonder he'd be one of the 188 cm tall male characters vying for the female lead in the original story. I said earnestly, it'll be a win for you. And a win for me. That's what an even bigger win is. Pushing yourself just for my sake isn't a real win. He knelt down slightly, placing my hand on his head, and smiled. Mother, don't worry, I understand what you mean. That year, Xielanting shone brightly in the county exam, becoming the youngest scholar. My Lantai Academy was officially established and began enrolling students. I didn't restrict admission based on family background, but I did set up tests and interviews. Some people refused to accept this and left in a huff, but others came eagerly, finding it interesting. I brought over as many modern educational methods as I could adapt, while also incorporating elements from this era. I aimed to add a touch of innovation to tradition, not to completely detach from reality. After all, I only wanted to live well in this era, not become some overpowered protagonist. I was already satisfied with using the information gap between the two eras to make a little money and live comfortably. I'd never push myself to do more than I was capable of. Lantai Academy welcomed both wealthy young masters and students from poor families. At first, conflicts abounded, sneers about shabby clothes, quarrels over trivial resources, even cold shoulders based solely on family background. But after a wilderness training trip, where I deliberately set up several major challenges for them, those class prejudices began to crack. It started with a sudden downpour on the second day of the trip. The wealthy students, who'd brought fine tents and silk bedding, watched in panic as their tents leaked and their belongings got soaked. Meanwhile, the poor students, used to roughing it in the countryside, quickly set up simple shelters with bamboo and tarpaulins. Then silently shared their dry rations with those who were stranded. Later, when we encountered a flooded stream blocking our path, it was a poor student who suggested using vines to build a makeshift bridge, and a wealthy student who contributed his strong silk rope to reinforce it. By the time we returned to the academy, the lines between rich and poor had blurred. They'd started calling each other by name, sharing notes, and even arguing over who got to lead the morning reading. It was just a small crack, but I knew it was a good start. Xielanting made several true friends here. Unlike the original story, where he grew up isolated and bullied, he now drew people to him with his sense of responsibility, wisdom, and loyalty during the training. When a younger student sprained his ankle, he carried the boy on his back for 3 miles without a word. When the group debated whether to take a shortcut, which might be dangerous, or stick to the long path, which would make them late, he proposed sending a scout first to assess the risk, calming everyone's anxiety. By the end of the term, he was the most popular boy in his class. Even the initially arrogant wealthy students would seek his advice. Song Weixian, too, became the most beloved girl in her all-female class. I'd always thought she'd be timid, having endured so much neglect as a child. But after years of being loved and encouraged, Her true personality emerged, lively, cheerful, quick-witted, and sharp-tongued. She had a knack for seeing through lies and standing up for what was right. Once, a wealthy female student mocked a poor classmate for wearing patched clothes. Song Weixian immediately retorted, "Your silk dress is pretty, but it doesn't make your heart any kinder. At least her clothes are clean, can you say the same about your words?" She soon became the protector of her class, with a group of loyal friends who'd follow her lead. I was relieved they'd gained another support in their lives. I'd once heard a theory: true independence isn't about relying solely on oneself, it's about having multiple pillars in life: family, friendship, love, and other bonds. Each bond gives you strength. That's real independence. Isolating yourself, with no one to lean on, is not strength, it's loneliness. I deeply agreed with this. I hoped Xie Lanting and Song Weixian would build many such pillars in their lives, so that when they face difficulties, they'd have multiple ways to solve them, not just relying on themselves or one person. That way, they'd never fall into despair if one pillar crumbled. I, too, was building my own pillars: my businesses, my academy, my friendship with the Princess Dowager, even the trust of the servants who worked for me. Whether I'd traveled into this book or not, I wanted to live a good life. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. Xie Lanting passed the provincial exam at 13, becoming a Juren, and the imperial exam at 16, earning the title of Jinsha. During the final palace exam, his extraordinary good looks and eloquent answers won him the title of Tanhua, 3rd place. Mr. Zhu sighed with regret, lamenting that Xie Lanting hadn't won the top 3 titles: Zhuangyuan, Bangyang, Tanhua, a rare honor that would have made him famous throughout history. But I thought it was perfect. Perhaps fate had other plans for him. After all, he wasn't the male lead, only the second male lead. The heavens wouldn't give him every good thing. That same year, the 9th prince, who'd been raised on the northern frontier, returned to the capital. His arrival immediately overshadowed Xie Lanting's fame. He was breathtakingly handsome, with a wild, unruly streak. He acted like a reckless aristocrat, yet everyone's eyes were drawn to him. There was something magnetic about him, you couldn't look away even if you tried. Also that year, Su Li, the eldest daughter of the Prime Minister, whose mother had died young and who'd always been neglected, was jilted by her fiancé, the 5th prince. On the very day he broke off the engagement, the 5th prince proposed to Su Li's half-sister, Su Mo. To everyone's surprise, the Prime Minister agreed, and the family celebrated the new engagement as if nothing had happened. I couldn't fathom why a powerful Prime Minister would tolerate such an insult, but that's how it was written in the original book. If it were me, I'd have beaten the 5th prince senseless for dumping my eldest daughter to marry her sister, even if he was a prince. The 9th prince's first act upon returning to the capital was to beat up the 5th prince. Afterward, he went to the emperor, wearing sackcloth and holding a rod, a sign of penance, and said, "I don't even recognize this so-called 5th brother. I never thought my own family could be so shameless, dumping the eldest daughter to marry the younger one, and acting like it's the most natural thing in the world." The emperor was left speechless. He punished both the 9th prince, for violence, and the 5th prince, for dishonor. This was the beginning of the male and female lead's romantic story. They'd been impressed by each other's courage and sense of justice, and their tangled, passionate love affair began. In the original book, Xie Lanting hadn't met the female lead yet at this point, and he still hadn't. But I knew the day would come soon. Sure enough, not long after, the Princess Dowager held a banquet to find a husband for her daughter, Princess Cheng'an. She specially sent an invitation to Xie Lanting. I was filled with anxiety, worried that Xie Lanting would be sabotaged at the banquet, just like in the original story. So I took the initiative to visit the Princess Dowager and offered to handle all the snacks and drinks for the banquet. She agreed. She wanted her flower viewing banquet to be unique and memorable, and she had high expectations for my ideas. I racked my brain to create new, delicate snacks, candied Osmanthus cakes shaped like flowers, milk pudding topped with fresh fruit, even small, crispy pastries filled with red bean paste. I assigned my most trusted kitchen staff to prepare them, warning them to keep a close eye on every step. I also gave Xielanting a long list of warnings. Never drink any tea or wine that's been out of your sight. The male guests' changing room is in the outer courtyard. If anyone tries to take you to the inner courtyard, it's a trap. Don't go anywhere alone. Stay with a group if possible. And don't change your plans at the last minute. Most trouble happens when people deviate from their original schedule. Xielanting must have sensed my anxiety. He'd grown into a graceful, accomplished young man. His starry eyes looked at me seriously. "Mother, you're worried about me. Do you know something bad will happen?" I shook my head, then nodded. "Fate is unpredictable. But I have a feeling today will be a turning point for you. That's why I'm worried." "Mother, don't worry," he said softly. "You've taught me for so many years. You have to trust that the child you raised isn't that naive." I looked up at him. He really had grown up into a fine young man. Maybe it was time for me to let go of the kite string in my hand a little more. On the day of the banquet, I sat at the female guests' table and finally saw Su Li, the female lead. She was a quiet, composed girl, dressed in simple, elegant clothes. She seemed to be hiding her talents, exuding a calm, gentle aura like a pure white flower. But not just any white flower. There was a quiet grace about her, a purity that drew people to look at her again.
Also reprimanded Prime Minister Su for meddling in marriage affairs recklessly. In a surprising turn of events, the emperor even issued a special edict praising Su Li for her quiet virtue and suitability as a wife, all because Su Li had accidentally saved the 9th prince, who'd been drugged. The carriage rattled along the way home, and Xielanting was downing water and snacks like there was no tomorrow. To avoid trouble today, he hadn't drunk a drop of water or eaten a bite of food. Now he was starving and parched. Song Weixian, on the other hand, blinked her big eyes, her face clearly saying praise me. We'd all had a tough day. I'd reminded the Princess Dowager to tighten security. Xielanting had kept an eye on the side gate, caught the thugs, and fetched the prefect of Jingjiaofu, and Song Weixian had racked her brains to keep everyone playing games in the rockery. Finally catching Sumo hiding her hairpin. We hadn't discussed any of this beforehand, yet we'd all acted in tandem to stop the farce. Maybe this was their awareness of supporting roles, banding together to stay out of the spotlight. Song Weixian leaned over, her voice soft. "Mother, is that Miss Su Li the fated one you talked about?" I'd once told them the rough plot of the original book as a story. Back then, I'd said, suppose this world is a book, there will be a male and a female lead who are favored by fate. If you ever meet such people, try to stay away from them. They're the ones blessed with luck. At the time, Song Weixian had asked curiously, why stay away? Wouldn't it be good to be with lucky people? I'd looked at her with pity. The energy in this world is balanced. If one person is extremely lucky, just think what happens to the people around them. Song Weixian hadn't understood then. But Xielanting had answered at once, the others will be extremely unlucky. Yes, exactly. When a disaster strikes, the leads are the survivors, and everyone else is a sacrifice. When they fall in love, the people around them are forced to become props. They love each other fiercely, while the lives of those around them are turned upside down. When I used to read novels, I could never understand one thing. Why would the male lead kill the female lead's servants just because she ran away? Why would the demon lord destroy the world just because the goddess didn't love him? Why would the male lead prove his dominance by killing people at will or wiping out entire families? Why aren't the lives of ordinary people worth anything? If I were a cannon fodder in some world, I'd beg the male and female leads to get married and have kids right away, with no twists or turns. Ordinary people can't withstand we just want to live well. We don't want to be sacrifices to prove how unbreakable their love is, how noble they are, or how extraordinary they are. The leads in this book aren't as extreme, but in the power struggles of the imperial court, the lives of innocent people are inevitably sacrificed. It's all to make the female lead seem intelligent, the male lead seem clever, to force the cannon fodder to choose sides. and to make everything reasonable. Maybe from a big picture perspective, this is unavoidable, but as a small, ordinary person, all I want is the simple happiness within reach, to have people I love and people who love me, a warm and happy home, a stable life, good living conditions, to help others when I can, and to accept help from others with a clear conscience. When we got off the carriage, Xie Lanting said, "Mother, let's leave the capital. I'll ask His Majesty to send me to a small official post outside the capital. We can come back when all the trouble here settles down." I agreed at once. As long as we stayed in the capital, we'd inevitably be dragged into conflicts. Today's incident was just the appetizer, there would be more to come, and I couldn't guarantee we'd avoid trouble every time. After all, Xie Lanting was the original book's second male lead. Someone as outstanding as him could never stay unknown. Xie Lanting wasted no time. He submitted a memorial to the emperor that very day. But the emperor set it aside without a response. He clearly valued Xie Lanting and intended to have him follow the ninth prince. But Xie Lanting was determined to leave. He went to see the ninth prince. The prince lounged lazily, provoking Xie Lanting to a fight. Xie Lanting gave it his all, but still lost to the ninth prince. To his surprise, the ninth prince looked at him with new respect. "Why don't you hold back like everyone else? Everyone hides their true strength when they fight me." "I don't think your highness likes being deceived," Xie Lanting replied, "and I don't like deceiving people either." The ninth prince's expression turned serious. "I have no right to interfere with father's decisions. If you really want to leave, find a way to do it yourself. I won't stop you, but I won't help you either." "Thank you, your highness," Xie Lanting said. This was exactly what he'd wanted. In the original book, the emperor had actually favored the ninth prince. But the prince didn't trust his father's goodwill. There were many misunderstandings between them. Even so, the emperor always took the ninth prince's affairs to heart. So as long as the ninth prince didn't cause trouble, that was already a win. Next, Xie Lanting went to see Xie Zhenxing. Over the years, Xie Lanting had mostly lived with me, only going back to argue with Xie Zhenxing on festivals. Xie Zhenxing had never insisted on taking him back, for one thing. Xie Lanting had clearly thrived under my care. For another, Jiyu Rushuang had given Xie Zhenxing several more children. He wasn't short on kids, so he didn't value Xie Lanting as much, but Xie Lanting still went to him. He'd long since realized that it was only natural for a son to ask his father for help. He'd let go of his pride and no longer felt that it hurt his self-esteem. Xie Zhenxing was furious when he heard Xie Lanting wanted to be sent away. It was extremely difficult for an official posted outside the capital to be transferred back, but he couldn't refuse Xie Lanting in the end. He even used his own military merits to beg the emperor. This time, it worked. The emperor appointed Xie Lanting to a post in Jiangnan, a place known for its prosperous culture, a truly good assignment. I finally breathed a sigh of relief and began to handle my businesses in the capital. Some I would keep firmly in my hands. Some I would cooperate with others on, and some I would give away as gifts. On the day we left, the Princess Dowager came to see us off. She was the biggest beneficiary of my businesses in the capital. Though our relationship had started with mutual benefits, over the years, we'd developed a genuine friendship. She looked at Xie Lanting meaningfully. "You're leaving so suddenly. I thought our fates would be more intertwined. I didn't expect you to leave so soon." Princess Cheng'en's eyes darted shyly to Xie Lanting. She whispered to Song Weixian from time to time, the bloom of young love evident on her face, so tender and endearing. I smiled. "The princess is brave and sincere. She's a wonderful girl, and I adore her. But both your highness and I are mothers who only want the best for our children. If fate allows, then so be it. If not, we won't force it. But with a good mother like your highness, I'm sure the princess will be happy." The Princess Dowager laughed, her eyes softening. She handed me a jade pendant. "Take this, it's a token of my friendship. If you ever need help in Jiangnan, show this to the local officials, they'll know to assist you." I accepted it with gratitude. "Thank you, your highness, I'll cherish it." Song Weixian hugged Princess Cheng'en tightly. "I'll write to you often. I'll tell you all about Jiangnan's scenery and snacks." Princess Cheng'en nodded, her eyes glistening. "I'll write back too. Don't forget me." As the carriage pulled away, I looked back at the distant silhouette of the princess mansion. The capital had given me both troubles and blessings, but now, it was time to start a new life in Jiangnan. Xie Lanting sat beside me, his expression calm. Mother, don't worry, in Jiangnan. We'll be able to live quietly. I patted his hand. Yes, quietly, and happily. Song Weixian leaned against the window, watching the scenery fly by, her face filled with excitement. I heard Jiangnan has lotus flowers as big as umbrellas, and sweet osmanthus cakes that melt in your mouth. I can't wait, I laughed. The worries of the capital faded away, replaced by the anticipation of a new life. Maybe this was the happiness I'd been looking for, simple, peaceful, and shared with the people I loved. No more fates to fight against, no more cannon fodder to avoid, just us, living our lives day by day, enjoying the small joys that came our way. In this world, we might not be the favored leads, but we could be the masters of our own happiness, and that was more than enough. The Princess Dowager threw back her head and laughed heartily, the sound clear and dignified. You needn't be so cautious with me. We've known each other for years. I like to think I've earned your trust. Song Jiari, the mountains are high and the roads are far. Take good care of yourself. I'll look forward to your return to the capital. With that, she stepped gracefully into her carriage, her back straight and unyielding, still the proud, dignified princess she'd always been. Princess Cheng'an walked away step by step, turning back again and again, hoping to catch a glance of Xie Lanting looking at her, but each time, she saw only his calm profile, his eyes fixed ahead. Finally, she bit her lip and climbed into the carriage. The moment the curtain fell, we heard a muffled mother, followed by a soft whimper. No doubt the Princess Dowager had covered her mouth to hush her. I couldn't help but smile. How lovely these young hearts were. As long as their feelings didn't get tangled up in lives and imperial power, they were pure and sincere enough to make one's heart warm. Song Weixian nudged Xie Lanting with her elbow, rolling her eyes. You're such a block of wood, can't you even look at her? I'm so mad for my best friend. Xie Lanting's expression remained calm. She's just a 15-year-old girl. She doesn't understand love yet. I'm not that shameless. Song Weixian's eyes lit up, and she leaned in teasingly. How do you know she's 15? You've been paying attention to her, haven't you? Ooh, brother, you're full of surprises. Xie Lanting ignored her, clicking his tongue to urge his horse forward. We traveled until we reached the willow-lined pavilion at the edge of the city, the traditional spot for farewells. There, we found the 9th prince and Su Li waiting, their horses tethered to a willow tree. It was clear they'd come for Xie Lanting. Su Li stepped forward, bowing respectfully. Mr. Xie, thank you for saving me that day. These are small gifts, please accept them. I didn't come to thank you in person earlier because I didn't want to expose you to retaliation. It wasn't that I was ungrateful. Today, as you're leaving, I couldn't let you go without expressing my thanks. I wish you a smooth journey and a successful career. May we meet again if fate allows. Only then did I learn what had really happened at the flower viewing banquet. After Su Li had been drugged, she'd initially planned to confront Sumo in person. But it was Xie Lanting who'd given her the antidote and advised her to report the matter to the authorities instead. I'm a law-abiding citizen, he'd told her. Reporting to the officials is the most reasonable way. If you confront her yourself, you'll only give others something to gossip about, even if you're innocent. Getting involved in this mess will leave you open to slander. He'd reminded her, a wise man doesn't stand under a falling wall. If you can use others' strength to resolve the problem, there's no need to put yourself in danger. Su Li had taken his advice, staying out of the spotlight and keeping her reputation intact. Unlike the original story, where even after clearing her name, she'd been labeled as aggressive and confrontational, she now remained the quiet, virtuous young lady everyone respected. The 9th prince raised a wine cup to Xie Lanting, his voice low and sincere. Take care. He stared at Xie Lanting, his eyes filled with conflicting emotions, reluctance, regret, and even a hint of wariness, as if he wanted to persuade Xie Lanting to stay but also feared what his presence might bring. My heart felt equally tangled. The original story's affectionate second male lead was leaving. How would the plot unfold now? Would the 9th prince still ascend to the throne? Would the Xie family still be wiped out? None of these questions had answers yet, But one thing was certain. We'd escaped the chaos of the capital and were about to start a down-to-earth, ordinary life filled with the warmth of daily existence. We were going to build a city not for war, not for fame or fortune, but for the people living there to have a stable life, to have food to eat, clothes to wear, beds to sleep in, surplus grain at home, and hope for the coming year. I knew this road would be difficult, but we would keep walking, step by step, toward that simple, precious happiness. As we rode away from the Willow Pavilion, the capital grew smaller and smaller in the distance. The wind carried the scent of willow catkins, and the sound of the Ninth Prince's and Suli's goodbyes faded behind us. Xie Lanting rode beside me, his posture straight but relaxed. Song Weixian chatted excitedly about the lotus ponds and sweet pastries of Jiangnan, her voice full of hope. I looked ahead at the endless road, the sun shining brightly overhead. For the first time since I traveled into this book, I felt truly free from the constraints of the original plot, free from the fear of being a cannon fodder, free to live the life I wanted. We might not be the favored leads of this world, but we were the masters of our own destiny, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The journey to Jiangnan had just begun, but I knew, with Xie Lanting and Song Weixian by my side, it would be a journey filled with joy, growth, and the quiet magic of a life well lived.